As soon as the first rays of the sun touched the windows of the old house, a tall young man, wearing a spotted-colored uniform and a shoulder bag behind his back, came out of it. He looked carefully at the sky and realized it was going to be a hot day. He was working as a gamekeeper in a distant part of the forest and wanted to be cold most of the way. But he had hardly taken a couple of steps to the wicket as a woman's voice sounded behind him. "Zacharushka, my dear, would you have stayed at home today? You see, already from early morning the sun is at its zenith. It will be hot, son. Mom, I'll be quick, there and back. And in case of what, I'll go to the lake to rinse myself." Zachar replied, adjusting the straps of his shoulder bag. "Take care, my dear, and don't stay long. Otherwise, I'll be worried," Claudia Semyonovna said to her son. But the boy was already walking towards the forest with a confident, fast gait, and most likely did not hear his mother's last phrase. The woman sighed and christened his broad back with the sign of the cross. Zachar was her adopted son, and several years of his childhood was spent in an orphanage. Claudia Semyonovna worked there as an educator, and the little orphan immediately took a fancy to the childless and young woman. Her life was difficult, and her husband, learning that Claudia could not have children, left his wife and went to a younger mistress. Since then, she lived alone, dreaming of taking a child from an orphanage. When she first saw tiny Zachar, who was lying in a basket left at the door of the orphanage, she immediately felt a huge wave of tenderness and sympathy for this boy. Claudia Mikhailovna took Zachar to her village when he was 10 years old. After the orphanage, everything seemed like a fairy tale to the boy, in which you can go wherever you want, play wherever you want, without fear that you, older guys, take away toys or food. Since then, they began to live together, sharing sorrows and joys. After graduating from school, Zachar became a gamekeeper, which he dreamed of becoming since his childhood, when he first learned about the forest and its inhabitants during the lessons on natural history. In the district, Zachar was respected by everyone, especially for the order in the forest area entrusted to him and his irreconcilability in the fight against poachers. And now, walking along a long familiar forest path, the young huntsman disarmed snares and traps set by heartless poachers. Today, surprisingly, there were few insidious mechanisms, so Zachar's heart was light and cheerful. "This way I will manage quickly," thought the huntsman and smiled. The path led him to the lake, and Zachar involuntarily admired its cool, calm surface. Suddenly, somewhere, very near, there were loud cries and calls for help. Zachar listened and, quickly identifying the place where they were coming from, rushed in the direction of the disturbing sounds. Having found himself on the shore, hidden from human eyes by willow thickets, the huntsman saw a desperately screaming girl who was floundering in the lake about 30 meters away from him. Zachar, without a second's hesitation, threw off his sack and some of his outer clothes from his shoulders, and then rushed into the water. The girl had already disappeared under the water when Zachar swam to the place where she was. But the guy was not going to give up at all, and, taking more air into his lungs, dived after her. Zachar was lucky, and among the murky water column, he managed to find the hand of the drowning and pull her to the surface. The girl had swallowed a lot of water and looked very pale when the young huntsman pulled her ashore. Zachar, realizing that the stranger's life hung in the balance, began to provide the first aid necessary for drowning. Finally, the girl breathed and began to cough, trying to get rid of the water in her lungs. Zachar took a breath of relief and stepped aside. When the stranger finally came to herself, she saw a wet young man across from her, who was trying to dry himself in the sun. "Thank you very much. My leg cramped up, and if it wasn't for you, I would have drowned for sure," said the girl, embarrassedly averting her eyes. "Come on, it's all right. It was just luck," Zachar answered modestly, putting on his gamekeeper's uniform. "Well, after such a thing, you just have to walk me home, though I'm not from here. I came to my grandmother for a summer visit. explained the stranger, blotting her hair with a towel. Zakhar smiled but didn't refuse because he liked the girl very much, and he kept looking at her furtively. On the way to the village, the young people talked and got acquainted. As it turned out, the girl's name was Christina, and her parents were rich and influential people in the neighborhood. When Zakhar heard about it, he became visibly embarrassed and began to feel stiff and uptight. The boy felt embarrassed that he was poor and lived with his foster mom in a shabby shack on the edge of the village. But Christina didn't seem to care about his financial situation. The girl chirped all the way and told interesting stories of life in the big city. When they reached Christina's grandmother's house, Zakhar shook her hand and was about to leave, when suddenly she stood on her toes and kissed him on the cheek. The guy blushed like a cancer, and Christina smiled and suggested to meet tomorrow. Zakhar returned home, being in a state of romantic reveries and dreams. The saved girl did not leave his head, stirring his heart and soul. At home, Zakhar told Claudia Semyonovna about the incident at the lake. Wiping away tears, the woman praised her son for his brave deed, but at the end she added, "Zakharishka, you wouldn't go to this Christina anymore. She may not be a bad girl, but she's spoiled by money. You're different, do you understand?" "I understand, Mom. I understand everything," the guy sighed sadly, feeling the rightness of his mother's words. But despite that, the next day Zakhar went straight to Christina's house after his rounds. The young huntsman didn't understand what it was, an obsession or a simple interest, but that he was magnetically drawn to this girl, there was no doubt. Christina met him with joy, and that evening, the young people had a very good time, feeling increasingly every day mutual attraction. Zakhar had no experience of such relationships, and the guy plunged into a maelstrom of feelings and tenderness, completely forgetting about the words of Claudia Semyonovna. The meeting followed meeting after meeting, imperceptibly drawing Christina and Zakhar into the abyss of romantic feelings and experiences. About a month after the meeting, the young people already considered themselves a couple. Their romance developed rapidly and was full of bouquets of wildflowers, passionate dates by the lake, and walks under the moon. So when, at the end of the summer, Christina went back to the city, she took Zakhar with her, of course. Claudia Semyonovna, as she could, tried to dissuade her son, but he was inexorable. The boy could not think of anyone else but Christina and was ready to go to the end of the world for his beloved. But to Zakhar's great dismay, in the house of his favorite girl, he was met with a chill. Arseny Petrovich, Christina's father, looked at the boy from the province with bewilderment and asked, "Daughter, and who is this?" "The new gardener. Well done. I wanted to replace Mikulich for a long time. He is old and the garden is completely neglected." Hearing his words, Zakhar blushed thickly and from shame almost fell through the ground. "No, Dad, meet Zakhar. He's my fiancé and we're getting married in the fall." Christina hastened to correct the situation. Arseny Petrovich and his wife, Alina Rostislavovna, contemptuously curled their lips but refrained from commenting. They have long been accustomed to the flighty character of his daughter, and believed that the guy brought into the house was just another hobby and nothing more. But, to their surprise, the young people set a date for the wedding and looked forward to her arrival. Well, and all right, if she wants to, let her marry. Maybe she'll sooner get over it. And this village simpleton will force him to sign a marriage contract. That's all, said Arseny Petrovich to his wife, rubbing his hands together. The wedding, of course, played a lavish yes, so that the whole city knew that the daughter of businessman Selivanov was not from a poor family. Christine's parents gave the newlyweds a brand new luxury car and offered to live with them. "So it will be more reliable, all in front of my eyes, and to look after the beggar, it will be easier," said Alina Rostislavovna, who frankly disliked her son-in-law. At first, in the elite mansion, Zakhar liked it very much. But when, after a few months, he realized that he was in a golden cage, it was too late. The parents' wife controlled every step of the newlyweds and insisted that Zakhar broke all ties with the Tega village and foster mother. For the orphan boy, it was a big blow, because Claudia Semyonovna was for him the closest and dearest person. Christina, by this time, already carried his child under his heart, and the guy consoled himself with the thought that soon, life would get better and become easier. But with the birth of his daughter Julenka, everything not only did not become easier, but on the contrary, even more complicated. Christina, at that moment, as if replaced. Instead of taking care of her daughter, she insisted that the parents hire a nanny to look after the child. Christina herself began to spend more and more time in nightclubs and bars, trying to make up for all that she was deprived of during pregnancy. Zakhar, at first, even tried to accompany her at these events, but after a couple or 3 visits to nightclubs, he became sick of everything seen there. All this time, the guy tried to furtively maintain a relationship with Claudia Semyonovna, promising her to get out of this vicious circle. Wiping her tears, his mother sympathized with him with all her heart, but she could not influence the situation. Once, a kind-hearted woman asked her to help Lisa, an orphan girl and a graduate of the orphanage, where Claudia Semyonovna used to work. To Zakhar's surprise, Arseny Petrovich was sympathetic to his son-in-law's request, and after an interview, took Lisa on as a housekeeper. Zakhar did not know that the greedy father-in-law was so accommodating that the girl was willing to work 16 hours a day for a meager salary. Lisa was immediately liked by the tenants of the house for her modesty and diligence. Over time, her employers began to send her out shopping in the city more and more often, knowing that the honest girl would not take a single extra penny. Often, during such shopping trips, Lisa was accompanied by Zakhar, who took the housekeeper shopping. Together with her, the guy was very easy, and he felt that Lisa understood his heartache from the joint life with Christina. Often on the road, they chatted about or stopped by the lake to bathe in the cool, clear water. Lisa was very fond of nature and always found an excuse to get some fresh air outside the city. With Zakhar, they always had a lot of common topics for conversation, and over time, Lisa became the guy both a friend and an outlet from the luscious life in a golden cage. A couple of months later, Zakhar learned that his wife had been cheating on him, meeting in a rented apartment with a lover. This deceived spouse heard from Christina's driver, who, because of their long tongue, could not keep valuable information. Zakhar, on stiff legs, went out into the yard and sat on a bench. He was painfully offended by the fact that all this time, he had endured all the abuse and humiliation from his father-in-law and mother-in-law only for the sake of Christina. And now, when he learned about the treachery of his wife, for him at once everything lost all value. Lisa, who saw that something was wrong with Zakhar, came up to him and put her hand on his shoulder. "Is something wrong? Why are you sad on such a beautiful evening? For whom it is beautiful, and for whom not so much?" Zakhar said sadly, without raising his eyes. "Do you want to take your mind off it? Let's go then to the river. I know such a place there, that it will rock you. A real miracle," suggested Lisa, who was hurt to watch the suffering of the guy. Zakhar nodded indifferently and started the car. The place Polina was talking about turned out to be beautiful. In this place, the river looked especially beautiful in the rays of the setting sun. Unnoticeably, Lisa took Zakhar's hand and the guy did not remove it. The cozy, intimate atmosphere itself sets the young people in a romantic mood. Lisa and Zakhar, even themselves, did not realize how they found themselves in each other's arms. Kisses, mutual tender words, and a sea of passion captured their hearts, making them forget about everything in the world. The lovers came to their senses only in the morning, when the timid dawn illuminated the water surface shrouded in haze. "What will happen to us now?" asked Lisa, wiping the tears that appeared in the corners of her eyes. "I will divorce. I have long thought about it, and Christina's betrayal only convinced me of my choice," said Zakhar with confidence. Returning home, the guy did not yet know that he and Lisa were at the river and knew Christina's parents. CCTV cameras recorded the moment when the young people, the two of them, went by car out of town. So, as soon as Zakhar stepped over the threshold of the house, a terrible scandal awaited him. Yes, your Christine, herself to blame, abandoned me and my daughter and walks left and right. I will demand a divorce and deprivation of her parental rights. Zakhar could not stand it and burst out. It's not for you, an orphan from the suburbs, to judge our daughter. You were sheltered here and starved to death in your backwater. Arseny Petrovich answered angrily. Zakhar tried to object, but at that moment the guards came up and, having twisted him, beat him up. Then they took Zakhar's breathless body out of town and, having stuffed money for the road in his pocket, threw it on the roadside. When he woke up, the guy understood everything without words and, having caught a hitchhiker, went to his village. Zakhar realized that he could not stand against such a powerful family, and he knew that he would not be allowed to live there. Klavia Semyonovna accepted her son with understanding, not asking him unnecessary questions. All the day before, the woman's heart ached, and she knew that Zakhar was in some kind of trouble. But the boy only hugged his mother and cried silently. He realized that she was right to dissuade him from any friendship with Christina. Zakhar recovered for a couple of weeks, and then he got a job as a gamekeeper in the hunting farm of the district. Being long in the forest, the guy rested his soul, trying to forget about his past life. All this time, he did not give up trying to find Lisa, who, most likely, was also kicked out of work. But no matter how many times he looked for the girl, she seemed to have vanished into thin air. Once, going around a distant part of the forest, Zakhar, in a hidden clearing, came across a dog with newborn puppies tied to a tree trunk. But the scary thing was that around the unfortunate animals, wolves were already standing in a semicircle, inexorably tightening the ring. Their jaws snapping excitedly, they were in a hurry to eat their easy prey. Zakhar instantly oriented himself in the situation, and, taking his double-barreled shotgun off his shoulder, fired over the wolves' heads. The predators, frightened by the shot, quickly disappeared into the forest thicket, and the mother dog was finally able to catch her breath. The unhappy mother looked very exhausted, and her babies were crying loudly, poking their noses into the empty, deprived milk mother's breasts. Zakhar's eyes welled up with tears at what he saw. He had never seen such cruelty in his life. The cruel owner took the pregnant dog to the forest to get rid of her and her offspring in one fell swoop. The strangler probably expected that the unfortunate dog would be killed by wolves, but the dog was lucky, and the huntsman appeared at a very important moment. Now, dear ones, I will help you without fail," Zakhar whispered, untying the leash from the tree. The huntsman put the 3 puppies behind his back, and the dog walked beside him, feeling the kindness coming from the guy. Seeing the dog family, Klavia Semyonovna began to feed the puppies with milk, and their mother with porridge and stew. Gratefully rumbling, the puppies lapped up the tasty treat, and the dog looked at the gamekeeper and his mother with eyes full of tears. Later, Zakhar named her Neda. The dog became his faithful friend and companion in all his affairs and worries. When Neda's babies grew older and stronger, the huntsman gave them away to hunters because the mother of the puppies was a special animal breed and could take any trail. Such tomboys could not live as mongrels. Their vocation was hunting and the excitement of pursuing prey. Zakhar liked to spoil Neda with bones, taking her with him to the market in the neighborhood. So it happened this time too, when the gamekeeper went to the hunting department with a report. The clever dog always pointed with a look at this or that bone, which he would like to get. But this time, for some reason, she didn't want to go into the butcher shop. Instead, she ran up to a pregnant beggar sitting outside the store. She was dressed in rags and tears were streaming from her eyes. Neda, as if she had known the girl for 100 years, ran up to her and began to lick her face. Surprised Zakhar came closer and called the dog, but it only squealed sweetly and continued its occupation. Suddenly, the guy took a closer look and, after what he saw, almost lost his senses. "Lizonka, are you my dear?" whispered Zakhar and knelt in front of the beggar. The poor woman looked up at him, and the guy realized that he was right. As it turned out, after the night at the river, Lisa was kicked out of Christina's house, leaving her penniless. Having no relatives and loved ones, the girl survived by casual part-time jobs. And when she learned that after a date with Zakhar became pregnant, she completely lost her heart. Soon, when the belly became visible, Lisa stopped giving work, and she could not even get a job as a cleaner. Having no means of subsistence, the girl became poor and begged alms from passers-by. Tears were streaming down Zakhar's face as he listened to Lisa's story. Hugging the girl, he went home with Nada. Klavdia Semyonovna, from what she saw, almost lost her senses. She remembered Lisa from the orphanage when she worked there until her retirement. Zakhar was ready to blow dust off the girl who carried his child under her heart. Feelings for Lisa flared up in Zakhar's heart with renewed vigor, and, so that the newborn had a father, he offered her to sign in the district registry office. Embracing her beloved, Lisa happily agreed, and a month later, the young couple became husband and wife. A couple of months later, a little Vanechka was born, who turned out to be a copy of Zakhar. The young family, in which love and mutual understanding, rather than money and power, lived happily to the joy of Klavdia Semyonovna and the inhabitants of the village. News about Christina reached the Tega village only a few years later, after Zakhar was dishonorably banished from her home. As it turned out, the promiscuous girl ran away with a foreigner, leaving Yulenka in the care of her parents. Feeling a silent reproach of conscience and longing, Zakhar went to the city to pick up his daughter. But his mother-in-law, Alina Rostislavovna, flatly refused to give her granddaughter. Then Zakhar, desperate, went to the kindergarten and took 5-year-old Yulenka with him. The girl remembered her father and happily threw herself into his arms. Zakhar brought Yulenka to himself, where she first of all made friends with Venya and began to play with him and tell the kid about kindergarten. But Zakhar did not have to enjoy the company of his daughter and son for long. The father-in-law and mother-in-law, together with the guards, burst into the house of Klavdia Semyonovna almost immediately after the legal father took his daughter. But seeing Yulenka playing with her little brother, Alina Rostislavovna could not stand it and cried. And Arseny Petrovich spread his hands and pushed the guards out into the street. After crying, the mother-in-law said in a quiet voice, "All right, Zakhar, don't. Why break spears? Let's do it this way. A month at your place, a week at ours. You're the legal father, and it's not your fault that Christina turned out to be a cuckoo. In general, Zakharishka, my dear, I pray for one thing. Don't deprive us of our granddaughter." After these words, Zakhar, for the first time in a long time, felt sympathy for Alina Rostislavovna. Hugging his mother-in-law by the shoulders, he agreed to her proposal and then gave the guests tea. Watching his children play, Zakhar furtively brushed away a tear and mentally thanked God, who gave him such happiness. In marriage with Lisa, the guy felt what he had dreamed of all his hard life. And faithful Nada looked at the owner with love and devotion, keeping in his eyes a secret known only to her and the angel keeper.